County, Cullen, and Heritage by DeMarcus Ward. Let us begin. Who was Countee Cullen? To understand who Countee Cullen was, we must first understand the environment that he was raised from, which molded him into who we know today. It's the early 1900s. As calls for segregation were raised, along with radical oppression within the United States, leaders of the African American community called the Town of 10th began to reject Booker T. Washington's conciliatory approach towards the African American community. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP, was formed in 1909. The Great Migration, 1910 to 1920, of African Americans towards the industrial cities were trying to find work and fill labor shortages created by World War I. All this was the catalyst for developing the childhood of a young Countee Cullen. A biography of Countee Cullen. Countee Cullen was born on March 30th, 1903, and he died on January 9th, 1946. Cullen went to live with Reverend Frederick Hosbury Cullen and his wife, Caroline Cullen, after the death of Countee's grandmother in 1917. Countee took up the name of Cullen, though he was not formally adopted by the Cullens. From a relatively young age, Cullen had a fascination with poetry, to the point where he garnered a lot of praise and awards for works all the way up to when he was 20 years old. Cullen obtained his undergrad from the New York University and his master's degree from Harvard in English and French. Up to the time of his passing, he taught English and French to junior high schoolers and worked on publishing 2 children's books, as well as a manuscript, which was later to be revealed as On These I Stand. A biography of Countee Cullen. Here's a list of some of his achievements, such as the Rich Bynum Prize, John Reeves Prize for Poetry Magazine, and the Amy Spignar Award within the NAACP's journal called The Crisis. All of this was all in his 20s for poetry. And he's the second African American to win a Guggenheim Fellowship. A summary of heritage. Throughout the poem, Countee Cullen questions his perception of his ties to his African roots as an African American. This is shown in the first sentence of the poem when the narrator says, "What is Africa to me?" From the list of things the narrator mentions, from the sun, the scarlet sea, and more, the narrator comes to the conclusion towards the end that his African roots do matter to him and that they are living inside him even though Africa is far away. Heritage was influenced by the works of John Keats, who was Cullen's favorite poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and A.F. Housman, all who relied on traditional European writing structures and verses that Cullen himself incorporated into their heritage, and it centered around African American racial origins and experiences that made up most of his work. Countee Cullen's heritage main draw was to highlight the importance of Africa to descendants of African American slaves in America. The poem juggles the narrator's confusion of identity while supplying imagery, while the narrator downplays the pain and significance of him being several generations removed from African roots, while he himself is a self-described Christian. and this is heritage, the poem. Cullen goes on to reflect that heritage was supposed to show the urge to reclaim the African arts in a form of a movement to exemplify by the motifs of the Harlem Renaissance. Heritage was supposed to be a cornerstone of Cullen's aesthetic, while also calling for African American poets to work conservatively as he did within the English conventions. Self-identity. What is Africa to me? The narrator is trying to get to a better understanding of his feelings, this being Cullen, towards his African roots and his African American identity. While he has an idyllic image of how Africa is, the narrator later concludes that it's the culture that lives on through them as a descendant of Africa that matters. The narrator's sentiment is explained in detail in Modernism, Mass Culture, in the Harlem Renaissance, The Case of Countee Cullen by Jane Coons, defined by what African culture was to a lot of African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance. Cullen also later goes on within the poem to describe powerful images such as the crop of sun, the scarlet sea, spicy clothes, and the symmetry, all of these that suggest that the African heritage was the power over him, has a power over him that was both a reason for pride and a source of shame for Cullen. This all leading to a more complicated self-identity. Discrimination. In the least way realized, they and I are civilized. The narrator realizes towards the end of the poem that the differences between his American identity and his African one is irrelevant. This revelation by the narrator is further depicted in the American speech in relation to how African Americans thought of Mother Africa and new public forums by the national black community takes on the challenge of moving away from racial designations. Think back, this all culminates to the speaker being Cullen, describing himself being a victim of torture by the animals, plants, drums, and gods of Africa. This is all different from the Cullen we knew at the beginning of the poem. He was self-assured, and he had an assertion that Africa meant nothing to him in the beginning, and he wanted to strip himself of his past as a African American and embrace his roots as an African. The poem expresses Cullen's pain of being separated from his heritage and suggests that a separation of his American identity and his African one is irrelevant. Religion. My conversion came high-priced. I belong to Jesus Christ, preacher of humility. Heathen gods are not to me. This shift in the poem is one of many times where Cullen questions, but later declares his allegiance to his American Christian upbringing versus his African pagan roots. In genders, races, and religious cultures in modern American poetry, Rachel DeBlease explores this urgency for people to define their theology to themselves, to seek salvation from a split religious conscience. And in spite of centuries of oppression, religious conversion, geological distance, Cullen's poem suggests that heritage cannot be but continue in the members of African descent, all meaning that the culture lives within you. And here's my works cited. He continues on to another page but this is mostly just links to the pictures I used in the beginning of the presentation. Let's go back over Heritage for a second. No, you can't see it, but let me read something off to you from Heritage. What is Africa to me? Copper sun or scarlet sea, jungle star or jungle track, strong bronze man or regal black, women for whose loins I sprang, when the bird of Eden sang, 3 centuries removed from the scenes of his father's love, spicy grove, cinnamon tree, what is Africa to me? In that stanza, Cullen's remembering and trying to recall everything he remembers from depictions of Africa told to him by So I Lie, who all day long want not sound except the song sung by the wild barbaric birds, growing massive jungle herds, juggernauts of flesh, the past trampling tall defiant grass, with young forest lovers lie, fighting trough beneath the sky. So I lie, for all is here, though I cram against my ear both my thumbs and keep them there. Great drums throbbing through the air, so I lie, for whose fount of pride, dear distress and joy allied, is my sombre flesh and skin, with the dark blood damned within the like great pulsing tides of wine, that I feel must burst the fine channels of the chafing net, where they surge and foam and fret. Africa, book-worn thumbs listening, till slumber comes, unremembered at her bats circling through the night, her cats crouching in the river needs, stalking gentle flesh that feeds. By the river bank, no more does the bungle-throated roar, cry that monarch claws have left from the scarred bards from where they slept. Silver snakes that once a year doff the lovely coats of you wear, seek no convert in your fear, lest the mortal eyes will see. What's your nakedness to me? Here heed no labors, flowers near, fierce colors in the air, no body sleek and wet, dripping mingled rain and sweat. Tread the savage measures, jungle boys and girls in love. What is last year's snow to me? Last year's anything. The tree budding yearly must forgot how its past arose or sought, set, bought, and blossom, flower fruit, even with starboard with mute. All that was to say that Cullen finally comes to the realization that his culture lives within him. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.